In set farming 1, we mentioned that our opponent's stack size, relative to the size of his preflop raise, is the most critical variable in deciding whether set farming is profitable in a specific hand. In this video, we'll do a quick review of that concept, and then we'll start to discuss some more advanced issues that you should be considering when trying to calculate whether set farming is plus EV in any situation. You probably remember that the chances of flopping a set in Hold'em, if you start with a pocket pair, are about 11%. 11.7% to be exact. And in terms of a fraction, that equates to 1 over 8.5. In other words, if we play 8.5 pocket pairs, we would expect to flop a set exactly one time. So if we draw that into a probability tree, we have 8.5 hands, resulting in one set and 7.5 misses. In set farming 1, our opponent had ace-ace, and he was new to the game, so he liked his hand so much that on any flop, he always stacked off to us. And we ignored the small amount of times where he flopped a better set or he improved by the river. So we showed a nice handsome profit of one entire stack. And the 7.5 times where we missed on the flop, we just folded, so we lost no additional money, but we had made the pre-flop call, so we will lose the amount of his raise, all 7.5 times. And hopefully you're starting to notice that for set farming to be break even, that one stack that we win when we hit our set must exactly offset the 7.5 raises that we lose when we don't flop a set. You could write it as stack must equal 7.5 times the raise for set farming to be break even. But remember, we're playing poker. We don't just want to break even. We want to make money. So the stack must be greater than 7.5 R. And that precisely was our conclusion in set farming 1. The only problem is that video left out a big explicit assumption that we made. Namely, our opponent will stack off 100% of the time, which is a big assumption. In reality, no opponent's going to call 100% of the time, stack off 100% of the time. The real number's probably much lower. And what would that do to our break-even stack size threshold for set farming to be profitable? Well, let's say we ratchet that down to something like 50%. So our opponent only stacks on half of the flops. So what does that do to the probability tree? Well, we'll still hit our set 1 out of 8.5 times, but now we don't expect to win an entire stack. In the long run, we would be expecting to win half a stack. And so 0.5 stack now must be greater than 7.5 R. And if we do some simple algebra, multiplying both sides by 0.5, stack size must now be greater than 15 times the preflop raise. So I should have convinced you now that the right answer to the set farming profitability threshold question is not stack size of 7.5 times the preflop raise. It might be 15, but what is it? And if you look around different poker strategy resources, you won't get one single answer. You'll actually find a pretty big range of answers, anywhere from about 12 R all the way up to 25 and more R. And why is it a range? Well, it turns out there are several different variables that contribute to the likelihood that you'll win your opponent's entire stack. And a few of these variables are highly subjective, hence the range in advice. We're going to discuss a few of these issues or variables in hopes that you can start adjusting your required stack size threshold based on the situations and factors of the table. The first issue we'll talk about is that your opponent flops a better set. It's something we elected to ignore in set farming 1, but it's a real chance. It's a fact. It's not subjective at all. But it doesn't mean that you should play the flop differently out of fear that your opponent flopped a better set. In our case, You hit your third 5, but he also hits his third ace. You can't get into the business of guessing whether he has a better set and folding your set on the flop. That's not going to help you make money in the long run. What it means is you need to adjust your pre-flop play. His stack size needs to be even deeper. The prize of you hitting a set when he doesn't needs to be even juicier to offset that rare time where you both flop a set and he stacks you. Another issue you want to consider is position. In set farming 1, we had the best position possible for set farming. We were the big blind, and our opponent was under the gun. He raises with pocket aces, and it folded around all the way to us, so we were the last to act. There was no fear that someone behind us would have a strong hand with which they would re-raise and force us out of the pot. But say we were in middle position, and there were about 4 or maybe even 5 people left to act. That's a measurable chance that one of them has a good hand, something like ace-queen or ace-king, with which they'll re-raise, and if it's big enough, we'll be forced to fold, and then our chance of hitting a set is 0, because we won't ever see the flop. And what does this mean? It means as your position gets worse, the pre-flop aggressor stack size needs to get bigger and bigger, because again, that potential prize of hitting your set and having the best hand and stacking off your opponent needs to be juicier and juicier to offset all these small losses when you get pushed out of a pot pre-flop. The final thing we'll mention is the chance, the very real chance, that your opponent misses the flop. In set farming 1, our opponent had pocket aces, and he was new to the game, so the flop was irrelevant there. He's going to always think his aces are best on any flop, so he's going to stack off 100% of the time. But what if you're against a better opponent, or somebody who raised pre-flop with ace-king or ace-queen? These are reasonable hands for an opponent in early position to have. Say the flop comes out 5, 6, 9 when your opponent holds ace-king. You're probably not even going to get an extra flop bet out of him, never mind winning his entire stack. And these times when we hit our rare set and get lucky, but our opponent whiffs on the flop, these really further degrade the profitability of set farming in the long run. So all of these issues together definitely should have convinced you now that 7.5R is not the break-even threshold. It's probably something closer to 12R, meaning that pre-flop stack sizes of you and your opponent should both be at least 12 times his original raise, and increase that number gradually as your position at the table worsens, or the tightness of the pre-flop aggressor increases, meaning he's less willing to get his chips in on the flop.